We are four-dimensional beings. So we live in space, the three axes, X, Y, and Z, and the fourth dimension is time. It does feel a lot like we build for the three spatial dimensions. We build less for time. Time is what makes change happen. If you think about it, if there was no time, change could not occur. So if you tried to go from here to there, but there was no time, you wouldn't be able to do that. And we sometimes don't take that into consideration. I think we want to make sure that the different concepts of time are thought of in a deliberate manner. They're not an afterthought. I think very often we think about time as a vexing thing. We don't have enough of it. We've got too much. We have to wait hours to check in, to pick up a piece of a document from an office somewhere, or we just don't have enough time to do what we need to do. I am cursed by a German father and a Swiss mother, and so my wife who's from Italy calls me the White Rabbit. Alice in Wonderland, the White Rabbit always feels like he's running late. I'm late. So that's the curse that I live in. And hence, I think this is a very important conversation because we have three very distinct ways of conceiving of and thinking about time. I wanted to start with you, Upolu. Again, congratulations to the Pacific community for the award received yesterday with the Pasifika Futures Report. Where there's two things that are really important that I wanted to highlight. One, is this. It's a quote which I transcribed because I thought it was relevant to this conversation. It says, "No futures report can be written in the Pacific without exploring time, which in many parts of the Pacific is cyclical, non-linear, and ungoverned by the hands of a clock." What does that mean?
Thank you.
It's beautiful, but what does it mean?
Thank you very much. I think there's, let me put it this way. In the Pacific, the story of time is a story of the land. And we cannot distinguish these two, the story of time and the story of ecology or the land or creation. And what we have today is what the Greeks call the chronological time, the chronos time, which is about hours and working and labor and everything. But what we focus on more, what we lose more in our conversation of time, is really what Greeks call the kairos time, or what we call in the Pacific the ecological time, which we now frame under the whole of life time, whole of life concept of time. And what we mean is that because life is in the Pacific is shaped and influenced by this broader integrated notion of time, we cannot understand time just by the notion of hours. Yeah. We have to understand time in relation to the rhythms of creation, to the rhythms of land, and the movements of integrated parts of the whole system and structure. Yeah. And that is, I think we need to put more emphasis on. So I'm not discarding the notion of time and the clock. But if you're going to communities in the Pacific, especially the village communities, they have a very different frequency that they move on. They move on very slow in a notion of what we call in Fiji wakatambu, meaning the pause, the slow, the waiting is there. So, and then when we come to the city or to where we're working, suddenly there is that rushness of time. So how do we merge the two together? I think that's what is in the report that we had just read.
Let me then bring in Gonzalo, because the Time Use Initiative is exactly about that. We have unlearned that deep time that as humans we have evolved with. Tell us about the Time Use Initiative.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. From the Time Use Initiative perspective, what Upolu was talking about, the relationship among ecological rhythms and sociological rhythms, the way we try to merge our daily life, the productive life, the economic life, with our own experience of time, is based on the perspective that we can think about the uses of time in the legal perspective. The policy is referred to how we can understand that our daily uses of time are framed by legal aspects. That it's not common to think about because it's so under the stage, because we are accustomed and we born with this kind of habitus about the hour, the days, the calendars. But at the end, there are legal aspects. There are laws, there are formality, there are agreements. So from the time use initiative perspective, we encourage governments, companies, or organizations to think about the way they can improve the well-being, the health, the way the people manage their time, taking account that it's not just a question of measure, a question of productivity, but also a question of rest, of care people, of care child, ground people. What we can do from this legal aspect, from the formality of the time use initiative, is that you can rethink the way you are living and the way you are organizing social life, taking into account that you can balance your daily personal life with the familiar aspects, with the ecological aspect, as Upolu mentioned. And of course, we are in a global perspective world. We are interconnected in the more capitalistic and economic way. And so it is important to think about that this balance among rhythms could be reached also in the economical perspective.
Great. So we've heard about the cyclical and ecological time. We have heard about legal time. I'd like to turn to you, Lisa, about the work that you do at the Long Now Foundation, the 10,000-year clock, and how you think, how that helps people think about not just about the things that they've got to do on a daily basis and in their social organization, but what does the work you do mean for us as a culture?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on this extraordinary panel, and even congratulations on this whole 2 days, 4 days. Time has felt suspended being here, and it has opened up. And it's just been an extraordinary experience to be a part of. And I am here in multiple roles, including as a board member of the Long Now Foundation. And for those that are new to the Long Now Foundation, it was started in 1996 by some very big thinkers. Stuart Brand created the Whole Earth Catalog, for those of you that remember that in the Wayback Machine, responsible for helping get the first blue orb picture from space to help us feel more connected. So just always at the forefront of thinking about what might be coming next. And he was having conversations with other fellow big thinkers, Danny Hillis, who is a just celebrated engineer, Brian Eno, extraordinary musician, and they were talking about, as we got closer to 2000, that was a conversation we kept having for many years. So from 1990 to 2000, 1995 to 2000, like the years got shorter. And we even heard that yesterday in the opening of the session with His Excellency Belhul, where he talked about focus as the new currency, that we used to have an attention span of 2 minutes, now it's 45 seconds. So Stuart Brand had that insight way back in the 90s to say, how do we take a longer term perspective? How can we ignite people's imagination to think beyond the short now? And had this idea that we needed something mythic, a mythic monument to capture our attention in a concrete way. So they had this idea of creating a 10,000-year clock. And at the time, it was a 10,000-year clock and library, because it really needed to be surrounded by ideas. And fast forward, just over 25 years later, we're nearly at the completion of this 10,000-year clock as one of its many projects to help expand our time horizon in ways that allow us to have a longer-term perspective and sense of responsibility. And I brought one of my favorite books where actually it was the first time that the clock was being talked about, if you don't have this, called The Clock of the Long Now. You could see it's very dog-eared. I've made my students read it. We talk a lot about it. But really, it's a manifesto and an invitation to make long-term thinking more common and automatic, as opposed to difficult and rare. And you fast forward now, so it's an opportunity for me preparing for this to return to this book and think, my gosh, how prescient it was back then when we were just at the dawn of the internet, which feels in some ways primitive, quaint compared to what's happening with Gen AI and algorithms, that's really taking our time, making our focus more short-term, more reactive. So the idea is through big projects, through long-term doing, like a 10,000-year clock and some others that we can talk about, and building out a vocabulary, a conceptual vocabulary of ideas to help us have different kinds of conversations about long-term. Yeah. So not only do we have these projects, we also have many, many talks that we catalog to basically fill our reservoir of new concepts of time, much like we've talked about. And you'll appreciate the opening chapters about Kairos and Chronos. And it really just made me think in my day job teaching at Stanford how woefully underdeveloped we are in our vocabulary, in our understanding of time. I mean, anyone here take a class on time? We just take it for granted. And yet, if we don't have ways of being intentional about it, of saying how have systems and structures been organized to make time happen to us, to make us think that time is money, which we know it's not, then it's being taken from us. And we know that there's many things that's uncertain about the future. One thing that's not uncertain is that time will continue to pass. And if we're not more intentional about how we think about it, then we lose it, and then we won't get it back. So I'm very excited about the work we're doing, about helping more people take a step back and say, what is a longer-term perspective?
Upolu, to pick up on Lisa's point, how do we get this back? Because you talk about the time concepts in the Pacific Islands, the ecological time. These are things that are innate to us, but they're kind of very much humming in the background. We've lost that.
Yep.
How did we lose it? How do we get it back?
Two responses to that question, Patrick. There's one, we have to build a new philosophy of time. The Western philosophy of time was developed around the idea of immutability and permanence. And that whole notion is that it has the implication where time controls us. And that's what I mean by the quote that you read. So if we have to move beyond the idea of mutability and permanence of time, we have to have a philosophy that moves, that is more flexible, that's about potentiality, that's about openness in the future, which is why we published this book on the whole of life philosophy, whole of life way. It's called the whole of life way. And in that book, it explains how the indigenous peoples of the Pacific deal with many issues, especially from the issue of time. And that is, for me, is very important. Let me put this in a little bit of nutshell when I talk about the indigenous philosophy of time. In a chronological idea of time that the Western philosophy has, is that we start with the past, the present, and the future. And that's how it goes. So we always look at the past as a past event or memory that has passed us. And then the future as, in the whole of lifetime and in ecological time, is that there are movements of the past and the present, and the future to the present. And that's why many language in the Pacific, for example, when they talk about their language for the future, is the language for the past. And the language for the past is the language for the future. Therefore, means that when you start talking about the future, you're actually talking about the past. So that kind of integration of time is very critical for us. And that is why many of the indigenous peoples around the world, it's not just the Pacific, many indigenous people around the world, when they talk about the future, we have to focus on the present. We cannot kill the present or compromise the present in order for the future. Present is everything, because at the present, the past and the future are at the present. And that whole notion of time moving as an integrated whole, we move together with the present and the future. And that notion of, that potentiality comes out of that. That's one.
Okay, let me just very quickly stop you there. I don't know about you guys in the audience. To fully appreciate what Upolu is talking about, I feel I have to unlearn a lot. I've grown up with a very linear concept of time. I've grown up with the past being the past, the future being the future, and us being right here, right now, often not so present as we'd like to be. But the notion that you have explained, where you're talking about the past by talking about the future and vice versa, is that whole circularity, and it makes a lot more sense because it collocates, it positions you exactly at the point of responsibility that you also have to future generations, and the kind of reality that you have inherited from the past. So I think it makes a much more organic, it makes much more organic sense for us to think in that way. But it requires a lot of unlearning. I just wanted to pause there for a moment and make that point. So to your second point.
So that relates me to gives me to the second point that I was about to, and it's all about relationships. It's all about responsibilities. One of our colleagues in the Pacific, Augustino Mahina, a philosopher himself from Tonga, has developed a concept of time called the tā. And the tā is rhythm, tā is time. And Vaai is space, it's about relationship. You cannot treat time outside of space and time. You cannot eliminate relationships, space, the moment that we focus on just rhythms, on just the tā, it means that we become individualistic. The ego comes in. And that's where the whole idea of immutability comes in, because we focus on an individualistic self. The whole of life philosophy of time is that both the tā and the Vaai in the Pacific is about relationships. It's about ethics. It's about responsibilities towards. And I heard that in the first panel this week, talking about the main question now is not really what is the future of AI, but what is the future of being human. Because the whole idea of technology is that we are focused too much on the tā, on the rhythm of time. We less focus on the Vaai, the relationships, the responsibilities that we have. Because the Vaai informs and manages the tā. And that's where the ethical responsibility comes in. That's why in that notion of time, tā Vaai is that the beating, the rhythm that we have, but it's a rhythm that includes all other relationships. Tā, you cannot just refer to yourself as the tā and Vaai. You have to have the other person. You have to have other communities in order for the tā Vaai to work.
Gonzalo, on the Vaai part.
VA, Vaai.
VA, Vaai. Relationships, space, and time. Those are exactly the elements of the Time Use Initiative, no?
Yes, of course, yes. I really love the conception of time they have in the Pacific. And we were talking before with Upolu the importance that local temporalities have in this discussion, no? How we can learn from local ideas of time to rethink the hegemonic idea of time that he expressed as the Western temporality, no? So yes, for the Time Use Initiative perspective, we have the notion of the right to time, no? The right that people have to access to this balance of the use of time, that connecting with what he was saying is the balance among past and future. Because if you need to be a more equality life among genders, among different levels, economical levels, you need to have more capability to enter into the future, to decide what you want for your future. And this has an impact in your past. And not only in your near past, it's the long past and the long future also, connecting what Lisa was saying. So we are talking like we need to express this new temporality, these ideas of time, in a more formal aspect that impacts in our regulation of our daily lives. And I think that it has not only impact in our personal aspect of the experience of time, but also in the intergenerational aspects, because we are thinking in the long term, the future, because we are taking care of the ecological aspects of the planet, of the soil, of the water. But this means that we are respecting our traditions, our ancestors, our trajectories. So this is my idea of how we can balance the becoming, no? The present, taking account that we need the presence of the past and also the presence of the future.
You're talking about connecting the past and the future. we're talking about things happening at different speeds. Lisa, the pace layers, naturally we're going to gravitate to that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about the pace layers? Because I think this is what the conversation is all about. What do they mean to us? And the second unrelated question, but I think equally important to that, is how do people react when you say, we are building a clock that's going to run for 10,000 years? What does that mean, even?
It's so fun to get people's reactions to that. I mean, from what? A 10,000-year clock? To wonder, to even when people get antagonistic, that would never work. It wouldn't last behind 4,000 years. And then you think, when's the last time you've talked about 4,000 years? So even just having something as concrete like that as a conversation starter to have a different conversation about time. And it is worth noting about why 10,000 years, and I think it was Peter Schwartz who spent a lot of time in shell scenarios before starting Global Business Network, which is where I started to do my futures work, noted that that's when the Ice Age ended and a new civilization was beginning. So even looking at not just a frivolous year, but marked on some long history to help extend our future. And I just want to go back to, Patrick, something you said earlier in the intro, which is this idea of it's not just time, it's change over time. And not all change happens at the same pace. And that, again, is a literacy that we can develop, new ways of thinking about how change happens. And when we're so reactive, again, with our attention spans being so divisive, everything feels like an emergency. Everything feels like it's changing all at once. And it makes us feel agitated. My colleague, Scott Dorley, the creative director of the D School, he says, our nervous systems are nervous. That's a hard place to be when we're trying to be imaginative, reflective, take a beat, when we're stimulated all the time. So the pace layer model was something that Stuart Brand had thought of coming off of a book he wrote called How Buildings Learn. And one of the things he learned in that experience of trying to understand the built environment and its place with civilization, maybe we could think about it in terms of this museum and how rapidly things have changed, is that buildings don't change all at one time. I was amazed yesterday morning when they turned the keynote into workshop sessions in like 20 minutes. I thought, no way. But again, take out chairs, put in tables, all of a sudden you have different functionality. But if you want to change the windows, that will take more time. If you want to change the walls, that will take more time. If you want to change the foundation, that will take even more time. And that informed a point of view he had about, well, how does that apply to civilizations? How do we build long now civilizations? And Brian Eno, again in this dialogue, says civilizations that look after the long now are more resilient. They're more responsible for one another. And so the pace layer model was a way of describing change over time. And I believe there's 6 levels. Get my math here. The idea is to categorize and again put concepts around better understanding how we could think about how our civilization grows and changes. So the first layer is the fashion layer. We're used to fashion changing quickly. What's the fad of the season? What's happening now? It's not a surprise that it changes. The next layer is commerce, that is supporting that top layer. Then is the layer of infrastructure, then governance, then culture, then nature. And the idea is that the top layers are supposed to experiment and learn, while the bottom layers stabilize, as you were talking about ecologies. They're supposed to remember. What happens is that when the bottom layers move faster than the top layers, you can get revolution. And I think in part we're starting to see that. Levels of culture are moving faster than our governance and than our infrastructure, and it's very destabilizing. And so this model is not meant to be a predictor, it's not meant to solve anything in its own right, but it's meant, I think, to help us understand how to pay attention, as this panel is exploring, to these different layers, how to nurture them, how to honor them, and how to understand how they interact with each other. And I'll just say one more word about pace layers to make it concrete. We use this in the class I teach at Stanford. It's called Inventing the Future. And the idea is to expose our students to ways of thinking about how they could have more agency in a world that feels like it's happening to us. And this model is very expansive for them that really only know digital speed of time, not pace layers of time. And so when we say things to them like, let's take a look at now, unfortunately in California, we have wildfire season. That's an unfortunate new development that we have. And we say, help identify in the pace layers, where is wildfire? Now all of a sudden they can say, well, it's of course in nature because it's drying out, we have temperature rising, we have more dry land, but it's also in governance because we're not paying attention to proper deforestation to make the land healthier. It's also in infrastructure to see which ones are vulnerable. So I share that because it's a helpful way to diagnose these adaptive, big global problems in more digestible bites, and then allows them to think about, well, if you were to propose a solution, where would you propose it, which layer, and what other layers would you have to recruit in order to bring that solution to bear? So again, it helps them think more systemically, more temporally, to think, oh, I'm not going to solve everything with an app or with ChatGPT. I really need to think about what stakeholders do I need to engage in those different layers, and how do I foster these ideas so that they have more resilience?
It comes back to having agency over your own time. Have we lost that, Gonzalo? Have we lost agency over our time? It's a resource that we possess. My time is mine, right?
Yeah.
It's a kind of, is it a common good? But at the same time, it's an individual
Yes.
good as well.
I like to use the word becoming in English, that in Spanish is devenir. No? The devenir is becoming, the permanent idea that everything is changing. And you are watching the pictures, the girl is looking at the sun clock, is my girl, Emily, and for me, this picture represents the idea of becoming, something that you captures just an instant and give you the significance of the whole life. So for me, we are so accelerated with technological media and the cars and everything that goes more and more faster, that we are not grasping the instant, more simple instant that is the becoming. What happens in that simple moment that you are looking for a single grain of sand, grasping, and also we are not taking account our own biological rhythms. We are not taking account our breath, our heartbeat, the problem of insomnia we have all over the world. People are not sleeping well. It's craziness that we are so evolution in so many aspects, and we are not taking account of the sleeping. So these are our great challenges to get more balance among the capability to do a lot of technological things, technology, but also to take care of our health, our relationships, our way to take care of the nature, and to build a society that respects our own notion of time and respect others, as we were talking, the local temporalities, the local realities that don't have to be the same, don't have to be all in the same idea of the chronological idea of time.
Let me just very quickly come to Upolu, and then I have lost track of time.
That's good.
When have we lost track of time? Not in this session, but as a species. Is there a moment in our evolution, in our industrial evolution, in our recent or not recent history, when we have lost that connection with our biological time, our fundamental time, our circular time? Has there been a moment?
It's hard to define when the moment we've lost time, but to answer that question, we have to answer the question of being human. And really, it was during the post-industrial revolution that we really focused on the centrality of the human being in the world, and in industrializing of the world. Time changed after that, and we heard it this morning and this afternoon as well. And then the post-2 World Wars would really focus on improving the world and developing the world. The victors of the post-World Wars. That's when really the change of time, and we tend to lose it simply because we've focused too much energy on the chronos time that we have, and less on the ecological time, my suggestion is that we develop an integrated system where both understanding of time must be integrated. The reason why I'm saying this is that because Chronos time focus more on the process, while ecological time is a formula. Chronos time focuses on work, while ecological time focuses on ethics and relationships. And you cannot disintegrate those two systems together, which are central to time. We are struggling in the Pacific in terms of climate change. As we speak, communities are literally relocating from their previous communities into new lands and new villages that they are creating. And the whole idea of the ecological time is that Chronos time believes in Western psychology, believes that memory is stored in the brain. In ecological time, memories is not stored in the brain. Memories are stored in the land. When you lose the land, you lose that memory altogether. Yeah. And that is why it's very important that we focus on both the chronos and the ecological time in order to recapture and reinvent in what is very important. What I'm saying is that yes, we know time, we know development, we know everything about time. We know less about the ethics part.
Okay.
Being human, being responsible.
And I think we're now living with the consequences of having departed from the understanding of ecological time. They're having to relocate peoples from their islands is exactly the result of having moved from ecological time to chronological time. But you all have been sitting very patiently. I don't know how much time I still have on this session, but I'd like to open for questions. I have one hand up here and one over there. If we have microphones, and as the microphones make their way, I'll come to Lisa for 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I just wanted to build on another project, couldn't help it, that's recently come out from the Long Now. It's called the Centuries of the Bristlecone, where we created, in fact, Patrick, last year you had Jonathan Keats here, right? A wonderful, I really encourage you to take a look at. And about 10 years ago, wanted to understand, could we conceive of time in this more natural way, and can we learn from the land? And he decided to create a clock that honors bristlecone time. Bristlecones are one of the oldest tree systems that are in existence. And so there is a beautiful clock in the Nevada Art Museum that honors standard time, Chronos time, but also captures bristlecone time around the trees that grow their own time schedule, depending on the temperature and the water and the carbon in the air, to just pause and give us a moment to say, wait, whose time are we living on? And can we get even more comfortable with the variance of time? So encourage you to take a look at the Bristlecone Project and ask yourself, am I working on bristlecone time?
That's very helpful. A very good ecological time example. Can you please introduce yourself very briefly and then point a question?
So my name is Chandrika Dutt. I'm from Avasant. So my question is, are all of us, individuals sitting here, are we time travelers? Which means, are we jumping from one dimension to another, depending on the decisions we take throughout the journey of life? Like, do we do dimension jumping with every decision we take?
Did we get the question? Can you rephrase the question, please?
So the question is, are we actually time travelers? Which means there are multiple dimensions, right? So time is not linear, as you suggested, right? So there are like multiple dimensions. Do we keep quantum jumping from one time to another time, depending on the decisions we take throughout our life? Like maybe in another dimension, I'm a doctor.
Lisa, you're smiling. You have an answer for this.
I think the essence is, are we time travelers? Is that the question? And I think we are time travelers to the extent that we are open to learning about our generations that have come before us and the generations to come. I'm not sure we jump at it like there was a Back to the Future reference by Florence yesterday morning, quite in the DeLorean. But I think the more open we are to understanding our past in a wider lens actually helps then open our funnel for imagination on the prospection side. And Upolu, I was thinking about, as you were describing the ways that we might get more in touch with the kairos and the ecological time for all of us to consider is leaning into our practices of reflection in order to inform prospection, that those work as a continuum of system of what we get exposed to and what we allow ourselves to imagine. And the idea of dreaming in the future is a form of time travel in some ways, of the future that we might want to bring to life. And learning about our ancestors is a way of understanding what has happened before us. But with that, again, comes a sense of responsibility on both sides.
Thank you. Upolu, very briefly.
The notion of time travel, we're not familiar with that in the Pacific. What we are familiar in the Pacific is that some of the things we take our notion of time from navigation. So when we see the compass that guides us. In the navigational wisdom of the Pacific is that the compass is not in our hand. We are in the compass. The world is a compass. So and that compass is made up of multi-dimensions. Ocean, land, economy, everything. And you switch around in that compass, you are actually moving from one dimension to another dimension. So it's not really time traveling, meaning that travel from the past to the future or somewhere else. That's somehow linear in a way. But we are living the multidimensionality of time in real life. When we move from the land to people to communities, communities to the city, they all have different dimensions because us human beings are multidimensional beings. And it's in us and it's outside of us. That's the whole idea of, just to respond to that from a different perspective.
And I think it speaks to the pace layers. This thing exactly speaks to the pace layers. There was another question here. Who was, the lady behind, Gabriele, and then at the very back.
Thank you so much for your talk and your shares, your perspectives. My name is Makita, and as an Afro-Asian futures practitioner and emergent scholar, I'm really curious how we can reconcile varied worldviews around time, especially when we're experimenting and working with innovation. Futures work, which I like to call futures play because I don't want to perpetuate legacies of labor. But when I think about, for instance, institutions that are impatient with iterative efforts, or I think about infrastructural support that funds on these return of investments, I'm curious how we can shift metaphors from return of investment to return of interrelationality, or return of imagination, or return of innovation.
Thank you very much, Madam. Who would like to take this?
I'll share in the pictures that you're seeing about, thank you for that question. It's a beautiful question, and even the reframe of work to play is so powerful. Our master design program at Stanford is a 2-year program. The very first project that our master students do is called Timepiece, and you can see a little clip of the project brief. And it's asking our students to foundationally reconceive of time, using their imagination or their lived experience, and to really break away from the clock, from the industrial notion, from all of the associations that we either have instinctually or put upon us about time. That I think about that commerce layer or the infrastructure layer. I mean, literally, our time right now is being monetized without other forms to help us understand what the value is through relationships and others. And Gonzalo, I was smiling, first of all, knowing that that picture was of your daughter. That makes me so happy to know. But there are a couple of examples of some of the reconceptions of time, and one of them is also on the hourglass, and it's called Our Time, OURTIM, by a student named Leah Everest. And she wanted to capture, in some ways, the experience and kairos of time, where you would listen to stories of people talking about when time stopped or when time sped up. And they would take sand and put it, you could see it as the student with the pink hair, in these beautiful different structures that would dictate how fast the sand would go down. And the thing about it is that there's no bottom, representing that these moments and memories, they fall through. So just one way of really helping us reimagine the value of our time that's dramatically different than how we think about it, by the clock, by the moment. And I'll just share another one that I absolutely love, getting back to just how much our time has been commercialized. Another project was called Thank You for Your Time. And the idea was you would pick up your phone and you would scroll down, and you would stop and scroll down, and at the end of a scroll, you would get a receipt that would itemize how much time you spent per item with $1 associated with it. And you say, oh, you spent a couple extra seconds on that cooking video or on that thing. And at the bottom, it tallies what the cost was of your time. And this is my favorite part. I think you can see it in the picture. It says, no refunds, no returns. Can you imagine if every day we got reminded about where our time was spent and the value we got out of it in a way that really changes how we think about where we're spending it? Are we spending it in the relationships and the meaningful moments, aligned with our values, aligned with our purpose? Or are we going about somebody else's future that dictated where we were supposed to put our time? So, and I'll share more of those projects with you, but thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Very, very, very nice example of that. Very briefly, Gabriele, and then there was a lady at the back of the room, please, just because the Kronos in me is taking over and ticking away. Be brief, thank you.
So thank you for this refreshing panel. In space-time, we have the future, we have the past, but we also have two other parts that are called the elsewhere. And this concept is also captured in the Zulu language, where the concept of time is made up of the future, the past, and the elsewhere. This elsewhere is connected to the problem that if we do not act in the present quickly enough or decisively enough, we lose permanently access to some of the futures that we can access. Is there a different concept of time that we can exploit to regain ownership of these futures that are seemingly lost?
Who would like 30 seconds on this?
Okay, I can.
Gonzalo, thank you.
Well, I
can also
think that
respond to that.
it's a great question. I think that the big challenge we have today is that when we are discussing the concept of time, we are discussing the new ideas of the future. And maybe the problem we have today is that we are so accustomed to the linearity of time that we are thinking that future is just at the end. And we are not familiar with this idea that future is in the present. The concept I mentioned before, the presence of the future, is when you feel that the future is in you, with you, and not just a dimension that will happen. So when you change this idea, it changes everything, because you are not just expecting, okay, I will take this decision because you would have this future consecutive action cost. No, it is about that you are connected with the future because you are living in this stage where everything is connected, and you don't have to be so carefully about, okay, if I did this thing, it will have this impact. So my proposal in this direction is we can start thinking different about time. If we have the capability to be not so strict regarding this idea of the linear and the sequential idea of time, that, it is very connected with what Lisa was telling about the notion of time is money model, no? The idea of why we are always thinking about that time is a resource. We don't have any proof that time is a resource. When people say, I don't have time, for example, my answer is, okay, where was the time? If you don't have the time now, where was the time? You have the time, it's in the pocket, it's in the wallet, where's the time? Nobody has time. So you can't lose what you don't have. So this is a very simple example that we are so familiar that time is a resource that we live in this framework. So my idea and the title of the book is Time is Not Money, because it's the idea to start thinking differently, that we are not a resource. We are not just a matter that we can divide into pieces. We are an entity, the same entity as we are connected with other humans, with the nature. And if we start looking at the processes, our decision making will have different results.
Just 5 seconds.
5 seconds.
Yeah.
5 seconds.
I just want to point you to a First Nations Australia notion of time. It's called every when. The question is not about what is time, it's when is time. And it's very important because it connects to what you're saying. That's the first point. The second point is in relation to the loss of what is ever in the future. Many of indigenous communities, including the Pacific, we don't see things as lost. It's sleeping elsewhere. It's sleeping alongside us. It's just a matter of awakening those what we call lost. But it's sleeping in and around us. But it takes initiatives and takes a movement to awaken some of these what we call lost stuffs in the future.
Thank you. That was exactly 5 seconds. Last, the lady at the back that I had identified earlier, who was that?
So,
Okay,
hello, my
please
name
go
is
ahead.
Yana. I'm from Romania, and my big question is, when we leave, time feels infinite. But is death the end of time? How can we actually relate to death in a constructive manner? I had a Georgian friend who said he wants to reinvent cemeteries, not to be like terrains, but to be more like places with the stories of people that lived. So how do you feel about that?
The easiest question for last. Who would like to take this?
The last of everything.
Okay.
It's definitely death is not the end of time. Definitely, unless you believe in Chronos time. From Kairos time, death is not the end of time. Death is just another dimension of the continual living through time, and that's why a lot of us, for example, Christian. I'm a Christian myself. We focus too much on death and heaven that sometimes we miss that whole opportunity that death is part of life. And the whole idea of relationship is very important. That comes in. So ecological time comes in if you want to improve more of what you think about death. Because in ecological time, there are moments in time where you have to pause and wait and prepare for death yourself. Because death is not the end of life. It is the actual living in another dimension.
With that message of comfort, I'm going to have to close the conversation. Thank you. And before I'm going to ask you to help me thank our amazing panelists, I would like to remind you that as we are leaving the stage, we are going to invite the president of the Explorers Club to come on stage because there's a ceremony, so to speak, happening with the flag of the Explorers Club. And I'd just like to recognize the Explorers Club as having been a fabulous partner on this particular track, which is Exploring the Unknown. You know what's going to happen after we step off. Before we step off, I'd like to really thank you for having created this moment in time, which was Kairos.
Yeah.
It was not Chronos, despite me. It was Kairos. I have learned a lot. The one thing I have learned is that I have to unlearn. There's so much more to think about the way we conceive of time. But the other thing that I want to just ensure that people come away with is that we are in charge of our own time. We own our time. It's our decision, ultimately, what we do with it, how we relate to it, and what kind of relationships we build with it and everyone around us on the aspects of time.